I think the gap in our system is we have rules for advocacy advertising. We do not have rules for advocacy editorial. All we have is a toothless press council, which media don't have to sign up to and can ignore if they want to. Now, for example, in the broadcasting field, we do have more regulation because we have a Broadcasting Standards Authority, which is a mandated body which regulates content, right?
So we need more teeth.
We need people to recognise that those authorities actually have a role in exposing what is inaccurate advocacy editorial, not just advertising.
Is a fair point, David?
Yeah, it wouldn't work though, because you knock up a video, you put it up online, and then it spreads like wildfire, and then someone complains, and then it might get taken down, but it's already been seen by millions of people of a particular age group that have shown themselves to be more susceptible to these sorts of things.
And welcome to the Christchurch Accord. What did they call it?
The Christchurch Principle? The Christchurch Call.
The Christchurch Call. It's exactly what has happened.
4 away from 5, the panel, a lot of response around breastfeeding. Bridget says mothers can make their own decisions about where they feed their babies. If you had a baby and 2-year-old, you'd have to be in the pool with them because the rules require that. You can't sit on the side. So if you are quite an experienced mother, you can feed anywhere. Feeding the baby to stop it crying while you stand there in the shallows, checking your 2-year-old doesn't drown seems pretty reasonable. Leave mums to do what works best for them. Someone else says, although I never usually agree with Michelle, she is being sensible about the dangers to the baby, Louise says. Breastfeeding is a beautiful thing, but I don't want to swim in a stranger's breast milk any more than I want to swim in their wee. And don't they need the rule, as mum whined to the media when she was asked not to breastfeed in the pool? I didn't quite understand that particular text, but thank you very much for your sentiments. On a final note, what about this? Millions of people flock to the Louvre Museum often to see one thing, the Mona Lisa. But many leave the Leonardo da Vinci painting feeling underwhelmed. Well, because of the huge crowds. It's been doing the rounds, this piece. The New York Times art critic says the masterpiece is a security hazard, an educational obstacle, and not even a satisfying bucket list item. He was roundly criticised for it, but he said it's time to take the Mona Lisa down, but others gave their tips on what could make it better, like banning smartphones. Many people are clamouring to take a pic with it. So, David, you first. Or have you seen the Mona Lisa at all?
Yeah, I saw it in 2001.
So what were your impressions?
It was very small. I also didn't know why it was such a thing, because I'm not terribly well educated on art. And yeah, I mean, there was a lot of people there, and I got up the front and I looked at it and went, huh. And then I moved on and looked at the 18 kilometres of halls that the Louvre has.
Did you feel underwhelmed? Did you feel that you agreed with this New York Times art critic?
No, I'm sure there is a reason why it's so special. Although it didn't become special until after it got nicked in the 1911. But there were better paintings,
Michelle,
better pieces of art.
Mona Lisa?
Never seen it. David's very fortunate. I understand it is small, and I'd like to see it one day, but it's not top of my bucket list.
No, that North Port of Whangarei is a top bucket list, isn't it? Michelle, Bo, David Cormack, thank you very much for being with us. Thanks to Ali for producing the show. I'm Wallace Chapman. See you tomorrow, 3:45.
Te whakarongo mai koe ki tō reo irarangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. E haere nei, protesters' last-minute push to persuade MPs to vote against the voluntary euthanasia bill at its final parliamentary hurdle. CCTV footage shows the man accused of killing Grace Millane taking a carpet cleaner into his hotel room and leaving with a suitcase the prosecution says contained her body. And the jury hears details of the Tinder date he went on while the British backpacker lay dead in his room. Police are hunting for a man preying on young women on Auckland's North Shore. EQC says sorry for the way it handled quake claims in Canterbury, and the Aussie firefighters that saved a couple's house and left behind an IOU for the milk they sculled.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, ko Susana Leata tēnei. The debate on the third and final reading of the End-of-Life Choice Bill has begun at Parliament. The members' bill, in the name of ACT leader David Seymour, would allow terminally ill adults to request a medically assisted death. The debate has been extended to 3 hours, with double the number of speeches than usually allowed. Mr Seymour told Parliament strong public support stems from personal experience.
And I've listened to New Zealanders talk about their experiences literally from kirikiri to gore. Overwhelmingly, they've said to me, I've seen bad death. If my time comes and I'm not doing well, then I want choice. And by the way, it's nobody else's business but mine.
David Seymour. The bill's expected to pass comfortably tonight, but the issue would be decided by a referendum next year. Opponents say it's dangerous legislation without adequate safeguards. The Earthquake Commission has made a formal apology for its handling of quake claims in Canterbury. The apology from its chairperson, Sir Michael Cullen, is included as part of its annual report published today. Sir Michael says the report is an opportunity to show people in Canterbury and all New Zealanders that it is determined to do better in future.
Through an indication that we have been working hard at learning lessons from the experience, recognising the failures of our systems, and beginning to address those systemic failures.
Sir Michael Cullen says EQC simply was not ready to deal with the sheer scale of the damage seen in Greater Christchurch in 2010 and then 2011. A woman has told a High Court jury the man accused of murdering Grace Millane told a Tinder date he knew of someone who'd been done for manslaughter after rough sex went wrong. The evidence comes from a woman who met the accused for a drink in Ponsonby as Ms Millane's body lay in his City Life apartment. She said the accused was calm but intense as he told her a woman had died after rough sex and the man was charged with manslaughter. The woman also told the court the man talked about how lots of bodies were going missing in the Waitakere Ranges because police dogs couldn't smell below 4 feet underground. It's accepted that Grace Millane died in the man's apartment before he buried her body in the Waitakere Ranges. The defence of a former Dunedin doctor on trial for murder has accused the key prosecution witness of being comfortable with lying to the police. Bernard Scanther denies killing 16-year-old Amber Rose Rush in February last year. The defence contends that the 18-year-old witness was responsible for Miss Rush's death, not Mr Scanther. Defence lawyer Jonathan Eaton QC revealed that the witness had lied to officers investigating serious sexual allegations levelled by a former girlfriend against the teenager and an older friend, just weeks before Miss Rush's death. During a police interview, the witness denied any sexual activity between the trio. Mr Eaton says it shows the witness's comfort in lying to the police.
Just as you lied to the police then, what I'm suggesting is that you've lied to the police about what happened to Amber.
Jonathan Eaton QC, the witness denies he's lied about Miss Rush's death. Immigration New Zealand is to contact about 1,200 people with arranged marriages who missed out on visas. In May, it issued guidance to frontline staff that made it significantly harder for those with arranged marriages to get a visa to visit their partner. But the government says this will no longer apply. Immigration Minister Ian Lees-Galloway says the department is now dealing with those who were disadvantaged.
There's a group of people who were clearly declined because they were in a culturally arranged marriage. We think there's probably about 1,200 people in that group. Immigration New Zealand will reach out to them in the next couple of weeks and will reassess their application at no cost.
Ian Lees-Galloway says there may be an additional 1,300 people who may or may not be eligible under the new rules and will have to reapply. Experts have discovered arsenic in the smoke plume that drifted over downtown Auckland during the fire at the Sky City Convention Centre 3 weeks ago. GNS Science tested samples taken close to the fire site by the council and a researcher. Chen Liu reports.
For the first time in a decade, the air quality in central Auckland exceeded national standards on Wednesday, October 23rd, the second day of the fire. Experts say there were elevated levels of black carbon, zinc and arsenic within the smoke plume. The council says the arsenic was from the burning of treated timber, but is unlikely to cause any health concerns. It says the public were alerted and the air quality was back to normal the next day. Ko Chen Liu Aho.
It's 5 minutes past 5. One of the leading contenders for the All Blacks coaching job could cause a shake-up for Super Rugby even before the new season kicks off. The Super Rugby sides have officially announced their squads for 2020, with the season kicking off earlier than ever on January the 31st. But the question is whether Scott Robertson, who's led the Crusaders to the past 3 championships, will be at the helm of the Christchurch-based franchise when they chase an unprecedented 4th straight title. Robertson's made no secret of the fact he wants to replace outgoing All Blacks coach Steve Hansen, but knows the impact it could have on the Crusaders.
We've got a great foundation there where we can build off, and we've got some good people. You know, we've replaced Brad Moore and Ronan with Scott Hansen comes back from Japan, and we've got Andrew Goodman, who's had a great season with Tasman, coming to take over for Ronan, and then we'll have a defensive coach named in the next couple of weeks. So on that front, you know, we've been really diligent and working on a contingency if I also get the All Black role involved.
Scott Robertson. The Australian netball coach Lisa Alexander wants the Constellation Cup against New Zealand restored to a 5-test series to make the most of the sport's fiercest international rivalry. Alexander says the current 4-match format has an obvious flaw, as it allows the Trans-Tasman series to be decided by points differential, as was the case last month when Australia retained the title following a 2-all series stalemate. Of 7 Trans-Tasman clashes this year, 4 were decided by just a single goal. That's the news.
A mysterious foundation lends money to New Zealand First.
That is not something that I'm able to talk about. It is not something that you talk about at all.
Police visit tree-loving protesters after dark.
Around about 3:30, 4 o'clock this morning, there was a police constable walking up the road and we were somewhat shocked.
And it's show day in Canterbury.
There's some exceptionally good-looking cattle around. The interesting thing is you always think yours look really good at home, but then you bring them in and start looking at the competition.
Best in Show Morning Report, weekdays from 6 on air and online.
Then on 9 to noon, what will our energy future look like by mid-century? We hear about the most comprehensive modelling done to date. And after 10, trailblazing architect Anne Salmond on the role of women in the industry. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland to Taranaki, including Coromandel, Bay of Plenty, Taupo and Taumaranui. Fine spells today, rain tomorrow morning, possibly heavy with thunderstorms, returning to the west tomorrow evening. Gisborne to Wairarapa, including Taiape, mainly fine, scattered showers tomorrow morning and evening. Whanganui to Wellington, also Nelson and Marlborough, patchy drizzle this evening, rain overnight, norwesterly gales in exposed places. Occasional showers tomorrow, mainly in the evening, with thunderstorms possible. For Bulla and Westland, periods of rain, heavy and possibly thundery, easing for a time tomorrow morning. Canterbury, Otago and Southland, rain spreading north tonight, heavy about the headwaters with norwesterly gales in exposed places. Mainly fine tomorrow, but scattered afternoon and evening showers, some heavy and possibly thundery. For Fiordland and Stewart Island, showers. Chatham Islands mainly fine, showers tomorrow afternoon. RNZ National, it's coming up to 8.5 minutes past 5.
Thank you, Susanna. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. The third and final debate on voluntary euthanasia is in full swing in Parliament. The members' bill, sponsored by ACT leader David Seymour, would allow terminally ill adults to request a medically assisted death. It's expected to pass comfortably later this evening, but even if it does, New Zealanders will have the final say at the ballot box at next year's election. Earlier in the day, a group of a few hundred people protested against the bill on the front lawn of Parliament. Lined up in front of them was a group of about a dozen MPs from both Labour and National. This was the message from National List MP Alfred Naro.
Keep the faith, because there are those who believe that this is wrong. Keep the faith that even whatever happens after tonight, whatever the result is, you need to keep on keeping on. Because why our faith and our fight does not end with today or even with tonight.
3 hours has been allowed for this debate, which means twice as many speeches as usual. David Seymour took the first slot, telling MPs there was strong support for the law change, driven by personal experience.
Overwhelmingly, they've said to me, I've seen bad death. If my time comes and I'm not doing well, then I want choice. And by the way, it's nobody else's business but mine. They've thought deeply about harrowing events in their own lives, and I caution members of Parliament that we should not underestimate or belittle the public's understanding of this issue.
Now we cross to our political reporter, Joe Moir, who's live from Parliament. Joe, it's taken a long time to get this far, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has indeed, Lisa. So it's been 4 years since David Seymour first put this bill in the ballot. We've had a really long public submission process. It was 16 months of public submissions, which is actually the longest that Parliament has ever had. So it just proves the point, really, that there is a lot of public interest in this. Also, Select Committee was interesting. It was so divisive in terms of the people that were on that Select Committee that they couldn't actually agree to any amendments. So where we have seen some changes to the bill, like, for example, the narrowing of it to just those who are terminally ill, that's had to be done through the committee stage by David Seymour to get, for example, the Green Party on board with that element in particular. And we also saw the referendum introduced, which passed 3 weeks ago as well. That ensures New Zealand First vote is there as well. So 3 weeks ago we saw with that vote that it passed 63 to 57 in support of a binding referendum, and we're expecting probably similar numbers tonight. David Seymour said he's quietly confident that he has got the numbers.
You mentioned it has been quite divisive and there have been a lot of critics of this bill. Also, we saw a last-minute rush there, didn't we, in those pictures with the protesters outside Parliament. What sort of protest have we seen today?
Yeah, so it was a bit of a last-minute one. There were a few hundred people that turned up to protest today. Now, they had about 12 MPs from both National and Labour come and greet them and speak to them out on the forecourt here today. You heard that clip, Alfred Naro, who's very strongly against euthanasia. He spoke to the crowd. Now, he said that they needed to keep the faith because there are those who believe that this is wrong. So it just proves the point, really. As I said, there is plenty of interest in this. That's further proven by the fact that the public gallery here tonight in Parliament is completely full.
So the speeches have already started. So what have been some of the sort of standout moments so far?
So we heard David Seymour kick off things. He is obviously the person who put the bill forward, so he got that first speech and got to lay things out. He talked about the fact that he did narrow the bill to get the Green Party and other people on board who are really concerned about it being too wide. Now, the problem with that is that there are those who are very supportive of euthanasia and wanted it to be available to the likes of people who have degenerative diseases like Huntington's disease. Now, it's not going to be available to them. So he was a little bit apologetic that he didn't get that across the line for them. He also addressed the criticism from people saying that MPs had basically abdicated their responsibility by going to a referendum. He pointed out that this has been about 23 months of work for MPs, and the fact that they're here tonight voting on it proves the point that they are making a call on it. We also had Chris Penk from the National Party. He has been very opposed to this. Now, he talked about there being no stand-down period and there only been 48 hours between approval and when a lethal dose could be administered. He laid it out as effectively you could get approval on a Wednesday and be dead by the weekend. We also had Tracy Martin from New Zealand First speak. She found herself in an awkward position, she said, where she was thanking David Seymour for the work that he'd done, something she thought she would never do in Parliament. She said that it had been a long, hard fight and he'd really kept on it, and she was pleased that it had got to where it had with New Zealand First in the referendum.
Thanks, Joe. That is Joe Moir, our political reporter there live from Parliament. And as Joe mentioned, the debate is expected to go on for some time. But if there are any developments while we're on air, we will, of course, bring them to you. Footage of the man accused of killing Grace Millane shows him taking a carpet cleaning machine to his apartment and leaving with a suitcase the day after he was last seen with the British backpacker. Hours of CCTV footage from cameras around central Auckland show the 27-year-old coming and going from the City Life Hotel where he lived and where Ms Millane died sometime on the night of December the 1st and 2nd last year. The CCTV footage and the accused's first formal interview with the police were played to the jury in his High Court murder trial today. Our reporter Sarah Robson was there and filed this report. And just a reminder, details in this story may be upsetting.
In his first interview with the police, the accused told Detective Sergeant Ewan Settle that he and Ms Millane had met up at Sky City on a Tinder date on the evening of December the 1st last year. He said they had a couple of drinks and parted ways because he had plans to meet up with a friend down at the viaduct.
How did the evening sort of come to an end?
There was a hug and a kiss on the cheek and a thanks, nice meeting you. And then I said, let me know about tomorrow. And she said, okay, and then she kept walking.
The man said his friend didn't pick up his calls, so he headed to another pub on Queen Street.
How many drinks do you think you had in that place?
I would say 10.
10?
10.
Okay.
Yep.
Just all beers?
Yep.
The man said he paid for the drinks with cash. He said he was at the pub until 10 or 11 that night, and after that he couldn't remember what happened next.
And after that, you don't remember anything?
No. After that I remember waking up the next day. And that was it.
The man said when he woke up in his apartment in the City Life Hotel the next day, he knew he'd had too much to drink the night before. He suspected he'd been helped up there by the hotel concierge.
I don't know why I do it. I guess it's because I saw my dad getting drunk when I was a kid and drinking until he dropped. So I've carried it on.
As the interview continued, Detective Sergeant Ewan Settle asked the man what happened in the following days. At one point, Mr. Settle left the interview room, and when he returned, he told the accused this.
Obviously with this young girl missing, disappearing, and we're very, very concerned for her safety, obviously. It's entirely possible that she's been the victim of foul play.
Okay.
You understand what that means?
Yeah.
We've obviously got a lot of people working on this.
Yeah.
The man was asked whether he would voluntarily provide a DNA sample.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I know I haven't done anything wrong, so I'm happy to do it.
Okay. Some of the wording of the forms, because at this stage we don't know what's happened to this girl.
Okay.
It's possible that somebody has killed her. Okay. You understand that?
Yeah.
She might, when I say foul play, I mean that someone might have murdered her.
At one point, when he is left in the room alone again, the accused gets up and knocks on the door.
Hey, I just want to ask a question. Am I being arrested for something I didn't do?
You haven't been arrested, mate.
I was like, holy shit. Okay.
When Detective Sergeant Ewan Settle returns to the room, he reads the man his legal rights. He then presents the accused with a picture of him taken from a CCTV camera in the lift of the City Life Hotel.
That's on Sunday morning at 8 o'clock in the morning, 8:14.
The accused had earlier told the detective he had woken up at 9 or 10 that morning.
That's you walking in with a suitcase at 8:14.
Yep.
Yep.
I've still got that suitcase too.
Whereabouts is it?
It's in my room.
Detective Sergeant Ewan Settle pressed the man about his story.
I might have got the times wrong, but if you're assuming that I was using that suitcase for something, I've still got that suitcase in my room. And you guys can have it.
The man insisted he was telling the truth.
I'm being truthfully honest with you. I've still got that bag in my room.
Okay. Let's put the bag to one side for a second.
Yeah.
Okay. Where had you been that night?
I told you.
Okay. No. That's not the case. Right. You've told a lie.
What do you mean?
It is a big mistruth.
This afternoon, the jury watched CCTV footage of the accused man's movements on December the 2nd, in the hours after Ms. Millane's death. It showed the man leaving the City Life Hotel and going to the warehouse to buy a suitcase. He also went to a supermarket, and receipts show he bought cleaning products, gloves and gum and paid for them with cash. He took them back to his apartment and left again in a taxi to pick up a rental car. That afternoon, he went to a bar in Ponsonby where he was filmed drinking outside with a woman. He returned to the apartment, and just before 8:30 that night, he went out again and hired a carpet cleaning machine. About an hour later, the man is seen wheeling a baggage trolley up to his room and then wheeling it into the lift with 2 suitcases and a sports bag on it. The court has heard Ms Millane's body was in one of them. Her parents, Gillian and David, both cried as they watched the footage of the accused putting the suitcases into the rental car. Early the next morning, December the 3rd, the man drove to a hardware store in West Auckland where he bought a shovel. He was next seen returning to a car park near the City Life Hotel 3.5 hours later. Ms Millane's body was found in a suitcase buried in a shallow grave in the Waitakere Ranges a few days later. Mō te hōtaka o te ahi ko Sarah Robson, aho.
The jury has also heard evidence this afternoon from the woman the accused man went on a Tinder date with while Grace Millane's body was still in his apartment. Our reporter Sarah Robson is in the studio now to bring us up to date with the latest. Thanks for joining us, Sarah. Now, what did this woman say in court?
This woman who has name suppression, again, we weren't able to record her. She said she met the man on Tinder, much like the other witnesses we had heard from earlier this week. She said she had matched with him a couple of weeks earlier and they'd been messaging on the morning of December the 2nd and they had arranged to meet up in Ponsonby for a drink later that afternoon. Now, this is at the same time that Grace Millane's body was still lying in the accused man's apartment. Now, this woman told the court that after they had a normal old conversation after they met up, she gave him a hug when she got to the bar, went inside and grabbed a drink. She said the man had told her that he was from Australia and had come over to New Zealand to look after his sick grandmother. Now, she asked him how he was making friends in Auckland, and the man told her that he was friends with lots of police officers, which she said she thought was a little strange. The man went on to tell her that he had a background in sales, talked about his job previously as a sales manager for Woolworths in New South Wales, which she thought was fairly impressive for such a young guy. Now, she said she was asking a lot of the questions. He wasn't so interested in what she might have had to say, but she did ask him what he had been doing that day. He said that he had spent the day looking for a large duffel bag with wheels for his sports gear, and he had struggled to try and find one and had actually been to a couple of places to try and get that. She asked him where he lived. He said he lived in the City Life Hotel. She was surprised that you could actually live in a hotel. He also mentioned that he had a best friend who was coming to New Zealand to work as a Crown prosecutor. Now, it was at this point that the woman finally decided she could get a word in on this date, and she mentioned that she had sat in on a murder trial at some point and saw a 21-year-old man who was convicted of murder jailed. She talked to him about how sad it was to see that happen and how sad it was to see the victims in court. Now, it was at this point that the man told the story about he had heard of a guy who had asked his girlfriend to have rough sex, and that involves strangulation and suffocation, and the man told the story that somehow this had gone wrong and the woman had died, and he ended up going to jail for manslaughter.
So did the woman say how she reacted to that story?
Yeah, she said that this made her feel uncomfortable, and she quite quickly changed the subject. Now, she was asked by the Crown lawyer how he appeared as he was telling this story, and she said he was intense, but he seemed really calm as he told it, and that he had empathy for this man. She also described how at one point he had talked about how his friends who were police officers were having quite a tough time at the moment because there were lots of bodies going missing in the Waitakere Ranges, and issues that police dogs couldn't sniff out bodies from graves no deeper than 4 feet. Now, this woman only spent about an hour and a half with the man, and they parted ways. She said he apparently gestured where his car was parked. Her car was actually parked a similar way, but she felt so uncomfortable that she decided to head in a different direction. Now, she was asked... The man messaged her with a follow-up later on and asked, that was a great time, be nice to see you again. And she actually responded and said, no, thank you.
So these Crown witnesses, how far through are we with the Crown case, and do we have any idea when we might start hearing from the defence?
Not entirely sure of the scheduling yet, but we are very much drawing to a close with the Crown case. We've heard from another couple of witnesses this afternoon who had interactions with the accused man on that afternoon as well.
Thanks, Sarah. Sarah Robson covering that case. That is the murder trial of Grace Millane. It is 24 minutes after 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. The National Party is floating the idea of replacing the tertiary fees-free policy with a scheme like KiwiSaver to pay for university or polytech courses. The opposition party has released a discussion document seeking feedback on alternatives to one of the government's prized policies. Here's our Deputy Political Editor, Craig McCulloch.
The opposition taking aim at one of the government's flagship policies.
Fees-free has been an expensive failure.
Simon Bridges proposing to scrap fees-free education and replace it with a different scheme altogether. He's sounding out alternatives, perhaps making the final year free instead of the first, perhaps making it more targeted or offering student loan write-offs instead. But one idea in particular has clearly captured the national leader.
One is exciting: Education Saver.
Education Saver could be a scheme in the mould of KiwiSaver and account for every child, which the government tops up every year. The details so far are scant, but the options endless. One model suggests each child could get $3,000 from the Crown, but parents and perhaps even businesses could also contribute. Similar schemes already operate in countries like Canada and Singapore.
It has had very positive attitudinal shifts in relation to people's, families' view of education, but also a savings culture.
Labour's fees-free policy has struggled to gain traction with a lower than expected uptake, but the Prime Minister's pushing back against any move to consign it to the dustbin.
The last thing we need right now is to make it more expensive for people to get skills we need.
Well, it certainly hasn't been a failure for those who haven't had to borrow, and we're talking about roughly 30,000 people a year who haven't had to borrow for their fees. I don't think they would be saying that that's a failure.
But the Education Minister can't promise that he'll roll out the fees-free scheme to include a second and then third year as initially promised. Chris Hipkins says he'll update New Zealanders on his plans before the election.
There'll be plenty of time for that discussion.
Students want the scheme to stick around and they want Labour to follow through on its full promise. The acting president of the Union of Students' Associations, Caitlin Barlow-Groom, says it's made a massive difference.
What we've seen with Fees Free is we've seen less financial stress on students, which means they can actually focus on their studies.
National unfazed by the prospect of a student backlash.
They absolutely want the money and will take it, but I also sense a very real cynicism about this, in as much as they understand it's not good public policy.
The country's universities have never been that keen on the idea of fees free, but they're not all that enamoured by National's Education Saver idea either.
I wouldn't put a lot of money on it happening.
Derek McCormack is the Vice-Chancellor of AUT and also Chair of Universities NZ.
This is suggesting yet another system, complex, probably not needing to be universal. So I think there's quite a few questions to ask about how this thing would actually work.
Forget fees free or Education Saver, he wants to see more funding to help cover students' living costs. Another option canvassed in National's discussion document. For now, the ideas are just that, ideas. The National is to firm up its education policies and promises in the lead up to next year's election.
If you don't waste money on dumb stuff, like fees free, like Shane Jones, and you do invest in priorities, you can do a lot.
From Parliament for Checkpoint, Craig McCulloch.
Firefighters in Queensland are facing tough conditions today, with 68 fires burning across the state, combined with searing heat and a potential shift in wind direction. 12 homes have been lost so far, with many more in danger in isolated rural areas. 10 watch and act warnings are in place for other fires burning across the state, including one near Noosa, a popular coastal tourist spot. Water-bombing aircraft were attempting to extinguish the blaze while firefighters attacked it from the ground. Foreign editor Graham Acton has the latest.
Queensland firefighters have been in the air since first light, with water-bombing aircraft attacking an increasing number of fires across the state's southeast. Tracy Joby is from the Southern Downs Regional Council in Warwick, close to fires southeast of Brisbane. She says the blazes are posing a huge threat to some in the area.
Queensland Fire and Emergency Service are bringing water from outside our region in order to use helicopters and planes to manage these fires, because our rural residents just don't have the water in their dams or their house tanks to be able to fight the fires themselves. And that's certainly what we're asking our residents to be very conscious of in their own fire plans, that they may need to leave earlier than they ordinarily would because the conditions are so bad.
Queensland Fire Commissioner Michael Wassing says dealing with fires across the entire southeast has been an immense job, with more to come in the coming hours.
I'm really pleased the fact that we've been able to manage and contain, in many cases, a number of those very large fires. In saying that, though, we've got another tough day today, and there is an extended forecast that we are not out of the woods by any means.
25 firefighters from the New Zealand Fire Service have headed across the Tasman to help with the efforts in Queensland. Their team leader is Nathan Jones.
Got the call for help the day before yesterday. We found out about lunchtime, and then flights came through, and we're on the plane the next morning at 6 o'clock in the morning to Auckland, when we had a in-country debrief there. Just going over what to expect, what we're getting ourselves into, and just bring the crews together, and got here late last night, and here we are today.
Nathan Jones says it's been a nationwide effort.
We've come from all over New Zealand, top of the north and bottom of the south, and we have 25 fighters here to help and support you guys and do what we can to try and deal with some of these fires that are burning out of control.
But despite Queensland firefighters' best efforts, properties have been lost, leaving these Australians with little choice but to start all over again.
I knew the house was gone, but I didn't think it would be so gone.
Until you see it.
As much as it really is, like I said, you always hope for one little bit to be saved.
Police just came. It was just horrendous. It was just coming over the hills with the wind behind it. It was just crazy. Everything, birds had gone, everything had just disappeared because they knew what was going on.
The fireys did a wonderful job.
Those guys, they need medals.
More residents are now being forced from their homes by new fires in some parts of the Southern Downs and another near Noosa on the northern tip of the Sunshine Coast. For Queensland Fire Commissioner Mike Wassing, this is the beginning of what will be a long, hot summer.
With the number of fires that we have got, with the size of the fires that we've got in the landscape, severe fire weather potentially again through the weekend with the storms and continued erratic fire, the message really remains the same. We're looking for the community to help us to make sure that there's no new fires as much as possible, and where we do have fires to remain in contact, remain listening to us, and remain working with us through what is a very long haul in terms of an extreme fire season yet to come.
Queensland firefighters are now facing a wind change to the south, which will compromise some of their containment lines, possibly allowing the fires to spread onto new fronts through the night. Go Graham Acton, Tene.
Meanwhile, there were 2,000 emergency calls in New South Wales yesterday, as more than 80 fires across the state claimed about 50 homes. It was also one of the driest days since weather records began 137 years ago, with zero rainfall across the whole island continent. Police are investigating 12 fires they suspect were deliberately lit during the catastrophic bushfire conditions, including 2 which briefly threatened homes in 2 Sydney suburbs. The ABC's Gavin Coote reports.
More than 100 fires are still burning across New South Wales, and while the catastrophic conditions have passed, residents up the northern coastline are in the midst of yet another challenging day. Lynette Pike from the Country Women's Association is flat out preparing food for exhausted fire crews around Nimbin in the state's north.
Today looks pretty busy and it's very smoky, and I know that all our boys and girls in the brigade are out in the Tunnable Valley, and it's a long, hard day for them.
The fire in nearby Mount Nardi National Park is still burning out of control, and it's just one of 16 blazes at watch and act level in New South Wales. And as crews remain in the thick of active firegrounds, authorities are also counting the cost of yesterday's conditions, which were rated catastrophic for the first time. At least 21 people, including 13 firefighters, were injured, and the Rural Fire Service is still trying to work out the extent of property losses. Commissioner Shane Fitzsimmons.
We're estimating in the order, sadly, of another 50 homes that have been damaged or destroyed. So far this season, that would then make it somewhere in the order of more than 300 homes.
And it's believed a number of the fires in Sydney's suburbs were suspiciously lit. Emergency Services Minister David Elliott has this message for anyone responsible for deliberately lit fires.
You must have arrived from Mars in a bubble if you didn't know yesterday that the state was in severe danger. And the fact that we had people wanting to act outside the law, endanger their communities, really is quite offensive.
Diksha Arman is now hosing down her Turramurra home in northern Sydney, which was covered with fluoro fire retardant when the bushfire raged just metres away.
I shouted at the kids, get in the car, get in the car. I grabbed my dog, we just left the house as soon as... And within 5 minutes while I was doing that, you can see the flames were so high, like it was embers in the air, and it was coming on my car.
What were you thinking as you were driving away along the road? You know, I guess in the rear vision mirror you're seeing your house on one side of the road and the fire on the other.
Yeah, I saw that and I just went out of the Canoon Road. I stopped my car there and at one point I just saw like my house is burnt as well.
If anything, yesterday's emergency warning in Sydney's leafy North Shore has given even those urban residents a chance to put their fire plans to the test. Before yesterday's Turramurra blaze, Rochelle thought she was well prepared, but the close call has left her reassessing things ahead of summer.
It's just the beginning. Don't know what to expect. Hopefully it's not going to be worse than what it is now.
Is it reassuring to know that this has ended up this way, you've been prepared,
yes.
Or are there lessons that you can learn?
I think it's educated me to be maybe a bit more prepared, not to take things for granted, that it can happen to me.
And that's Rochelle from Turramurra ending that report from Gavin Coote. And coming up on Checkpoint on RNZ National, the Earthquake Commission apologises to the people of Canterbury for its handling of quake claims. Mums are banned from breastfeeding in Wellington's public pools, and a Dunedin 7-year-old wins the right to wear shorts to school. We'd love your feedback on anything you've heard on the programme this evening, particularly interested in your views on euthanasia. Are you for people having choice or against it? That bill is up for the final vote in Parliament this evening. We'll bring you news as it breaks. You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Apologies for a little bit late to the headlines with Susanna.
Ex-MP David Seymour has told Parliament he has strong public support for his end-of-life choice bill, which is now having its final reading at Parliament. The debate has been extended to 3 hours with twice as many speeches as usual. If the bill passes as expected tonight, there will still be a euthanasia referendum next year. The Earthquake Commission has formally apologised for the way it handled claims following the Canterbury earthquakes. Its chair, Sir Michael Cullen, said its annual report is an opportunity to show people in Canterbury and all New Zealanders that EQC is determined to do better in future. He says the Commission was simply not ready to deal with the sheer scale of the damage wreaked by the quakes. Immigration New Zealand will contact about 1,200 people with arranged marriages who missed out on visas. Guidance given to immigration staff earlier this year made it much harder for those people to get a visa to visit their partner. The government has now reversed this, and the Minister, Ian Lees-Galloway, says the department is dealing with those who were disadvantaged. A High Court jury has heard evidence from a woman who met up with the man accused of murdering Grace Millane while her body lay in his apartment. The woman said he told her he knew of someone who'd been done for manslaughter after rough sex went wrong. She said the man also talked about bodies going missing in the Waitakere Ranges. It's accepted that Grace Millane died in the man's apartment before he buried her body in the Waitakere Ranges. The defence of a former Dunedin doctor has accused a prosecution witness of being comfortable with lying to the police. Bernard Scanther denies killing Amber Rose Rush in February last year. The defence contends the witness was responsible for Miss Rush's death, not Mr Scanther. A Wellington City councillor says her council is exaggerating the risks of breastfeeding in swimming pools. Women have been banned from breastfeeding in Wellington's public pools because of the risk of contamination. But Councillor Fleur Fitzsimons says the council or the city should be supportive rather than making things harder for mothers. Those are the latest news headlines from RNZ National. Our next news and weather update is at 6.
Thanks, Susanna. If you're just tuning in, this is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. And it's time now for business with Nona Pelsier, who's joined me in the studio. Nona, so everybody was waiting to see what the Reserve Bank would do today with the official cash rate. And drum roll,
they did nothing. They left it just where it was, which is not what the market was expecting. They were expecting at least a quarter point percentage point cut. So that would have taken the interest rate, the official cash rate, down to 0.75%, 0.75%, from 1%. But that didn't happen. We're stuck at 1%. And the next opportunity for the Reserve Bank to review the official cash rate is February, and then again in May. Some of the banks have come out and said, well, we think the RBNZ got it wrong, which you would, so there you go.
What were the reasons given then for holding?
I think the main reason is that the Reserve Bank is hoping that the government's fiscal policy, which is to spend on infrastructure and so on, will kick in and generate that economic growth, what it's looking for, and to give it a chance. However, the Reserve Bank governor said that they were prepared to move if the economic conditions warranted that. They were, prepared to act if necessary. The ASB Bank came out this afternoon and said, well, yeah, they're going to have to act because as soon as they didn't announce a rate cut, the wholesale interest rates rose about about a 20 basis point hike. So that puts pressure on interest rates, the interest rates we the banks dole out on mortgages. And so there's a potential, not a big potential, but there's a potential for mortgage rates to rise as a result of this. Now, this is still just a risk. There's a lot of moving parts in all of this. But they're saying that basically they think the Reserve Bank got it wrong and that there's going to still be more interest rate cuts in the future, probably in February and again in May.
Well, because the casual listener may be thinking, wow, what's this all about? Because we've got relatively good unemployment, we've got strong growth when you compare us to other countries. Why?
Exactly, and it's very confusing. I mean, the basic problem is spending and uncertainty around investment. And that's not so much something that the New Zealand environment can fix, because a lot of that uncertainty is tied to other issues, global trade, Brexit, the US-China on and off again trade deal, and so on. There's so much risk, and I think that's part of the reason why. So certainly our dollar rose following that because it had been priced in, the cut, and it hadn't happened. It's really hard. The markets themselves are volatile, and we're going to continue to see that for some time.
Okay, so let's change gears. Main freight.
Very clever.
Thank you. So first half year profit, what was the result?
It was up actually 6%. Pretty good. And one of the reasons why, go figure, is that they're doing better in overseas markets, primarily North America and Europe. Yes, less so in Asia, China specifically. That's partly because of the China trade war and uncertainty about what's happening there. So overall, though, they expect growth to continue. And when I spoke with the managing director, Don Braid, he said that, the economy in New Zealand, he is expecting it to pick up. So he's definitely in the Reserve Bank camp when that comes to that. And the other thing he said was that while there are risks in global trade, there are plenty of opportunities. And he's taken advantage of all of them. He said even Brexit offers opportunities for the company.
Interesting. You mentioned the dollar, so should we crunch the numbers?
Let's do that. Yeah, so we moved about a cent from where we were this morning. It came back a little bit. So the dollar rose to 63.9 US cents. It was above 64 for a little while. 93.5 Australian, so we were at like 92.5 yesterday. And 49.8 British pence.
Oh, we almost made it over the mark.
Almost. The top 50 index, it fell 0.8%, 91 points down to 10,835. Main Freight's result saw their share price rise nearly 2%, although it was losing ground at the end of the day, and that's because the jitters have returned to the Asian markets over the on-again, off-again US-China trade talks.
Thanks, Nona. Nona Peltier with our business update. The Crown's key witness in the murder trial of a Dunedin doctor has been accused of making up a stream of lies to cover his own involvement in Amber Rose Rush's death. Vinod Scanther denies killing 16-year-old Ms. Rush in February last year. The prosecution's key witness took the stand for the third day and faced a grilling from the defence. Our Otago Southland reporter Timothy Brown was in court and filed this report.
The Crown says the 18-year-old witness drove Bernard Scanther to the scene of the crime and helped clean up after Amber Rose Rush's murder. But Mr Scanther's defence suggests it's the teenager who is responsible for killing Miss Rush. The witness, who has suppression of his name and voice, was grilled by defence lawyer Jonathan Eaton QC for hours yesterday and today. He has backed down on many of the claims he initially made to the police, to friends and others in the days after Miss Rush's death, as well as statements he made earlier in the trial. Mr Eaton today put it to the teenager that he had no problem lying, even to the police, and said his history shows it.
You're not uncomfortable to tell lies to the police? Just before Christmas in 2017, you'd been in the same police station being interviewed by a police detective, hadn't you? You were being interviewed in relation to serious sexual allegations that had been made by a 15-year-old former girlfriend of yours against you and a 38-year-old male friend of yours. And you denied that you too had been engaged in acts at the same time with that girl. And you repeated those lies throughout the interview, didn't you? And just as you lied to the police then, what I'm suggesting is that you've lied to the police about what happened to Amber.
Shortly before midnight, about the time Miss Rush died, the witness made a phone call to a friend saying he was involved in a murder. Mr Eaton says he was establishing an alibi while near to or even inside Miss Rush's home. The witness says he doesn't recall making such remarks, but is often overly dramatic. The witness also backed down from the claim he washed a bloodied kitchen knife, a claim he made only yesterday, following cross-examination from the defence. The witness now says he can't fully remember. Mr Eaton also raised a meeting between the witness, Mr Scanther, the accused's former girlfriend, Miss Rush's mother Lisa, and an unknown woman. It was revealed the woman was an undercover police officer. The witness told police officers Miss Rush's mother brought up an incident between Mr Scanther and Miss Rush at the meeting, and Mr Scanther said it wasn't the time to talk about it. Mr Eaton says no one remembers any such exchange. When the witness said he swears he remembers it happening, Mr Eaton fired back.
I have sworn, actually. Sworn to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Might what you said to the police about what was discussed there just be another one of your lies or exaggerations?
Mr Eaton says the meeting was when the witness realised his story was unravelling, so he got on the front foot.
You heard Lisa say at that meeting that this was not suicide. And I suggest that when you heard that, you panicked and thought, they're going to come looking at me for this. And that's why after that meeting and after you're dropped off home, you start calling your family and then call the police.
But prosecutor Robin Bates says such a reading of the facts is unlikely.
Mr Eaton has suggested to this witness that he is very, very clever. And I've characterised it as you being a genius, very, very clever, in that you have decided to kill Amber, you've managed to find a knife somewhere, you've managed to find a change of clothes, you've managed to hide or remove all the evidence that might implicate you, and you've managed to do various things which have implicated Mr Scanther.
The witness says he's struggled to recall many details almost 2 years on from the events, but he remembers one event very clearly. His words have been revoiced.
This is one thing I will never forget that will linger with me for the rest of my life. He grabbed a knife, a butter knife, and he demonstrated what he did to her on me.
The trial is yet to hear the evidence of about 50 witnesses, including Mr Scanther's former colleagues at the Southern DHB and friends of Miss Rush. In Dunedin, for Checkpoint, Timothy Brown.
The Earthquake Commission has offered a formal apology for its handling of quake claims in Canterbury. The apology from its chair, Sir Michael Cullen, is included in its just-released annual report. Conan Young reports.
Sir Michael Cullen made the apology as EQC tabled its annual report for the year to June in Parliament today. He says the report is an opportunity to show people in Canterbury and all New Zealanders that the government insurer is determined to do better in future.
It's really an indication that we have been working hard at learning lessons from experience, recognising the failures of our systems and beginning to address those systemic failures.
Sir Michael says EQC simply wasn't ready to deal with the sheer scale of the damage seen in Greater Christchurch in 2010 and then 2011.
We had all kinds of back office functions weren't scalable in the way that was needed. And then, of course, the government of the day decided that we should take on, for perfectly understandable reasons, take on a whole range of functions, like overseeing a managed repair program, which we had absolutely no experience in, really.
So how well is the agency doing now, especially since the changes brought in by its new minister, Megan Woods? Incredibly, 9 years after the 2010 quake, new claims are still coming in due to damage being missed or initial repairs being botched. So while the annual report shows most claims for the year ending June were resolved, 8,000 in total, the work has continued piling up. As of the end of September, there were 2,500 claims still to be resolved. Sir Michael expects more to come in over the next year, as so-called owners of onsolds, houses with unscoped damage or faulty repairs, take advantage of the government's Fix-It fund.
We could have contested that legally, but the government quite rightly has decided that there should be a special program for those people, and we're administering that program. And the government set aside some $300 million for that program.
Debbie Momo is one of those in the onsold category. After a 3-year battle, including court action, which she could no longer afford, this year she settled her case with EQC. She didn't get enough to carry out the rebuild she's been told should be completed on her home, but says she ran out of energy to keep fighting.
We were so tired, and I wasn't very well at the time, and we'd had enough. Really, the stress really took its toll on everything, our health, our relationship. Really horrible thing to go through when that's all you can think about every day is, I wonder what will happen today. I wonder, will anybody actually do anything today? Will anyone listen to us? And it just went on for 3 years. 3 years.
News of today's apology from EQC is no consolation for Debbie Momo.
It's just words, isn't it? It doesn't mean anything. Doesn't mean anything at all. I've still got friends that are fighting really hard. No, that doesn't mean anything. Unless, of course, he's actually going to do something about it.
Debbie Momo says their home is now worthless, and even the land it sits on is compromised. She says her and her partner plan to live in it for as long as they can, but don't anticipate being able to ever make back what they paid for it. Kei o te tahi aho, mō te hōtaka o te ahi, ko Konanyang tēnei.
It's 9 minutes to 6. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. We're keen for your feedback. Let us know what you think of that EQC apology. Does it mean anything or nothing at all to you, and why? You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Mums who want to breastfeed in Wellington's public pools have been officially benched. It comes 6 months after a mother was told to get out of a pool at the Wellington Regional Aquatic Centre because she was breastfeeding her 20-month-old son. The City Council says breastfeeding while in the water poses a risk of contamination. But some mums say authorities need to be making life easier rather than harder for new parents. Charlotte Cook reports.
Rebecca Robertson was breastfeeding her 20-month-old son in the shallows of Kilburney Pool in May. Ironically, at the time she was speaking to an American visitor, talking about how great New Zealand is because you can breastfeed anywhere. But to her surprise, she was asked to leave the pool.
I thought we'd gone way, way, way beyond policing where women breastfeed, to be honest. So I was quite taken aback. And then when I asked to look at the policy, it was under the food and beverage policy, which, to be honest, made me smile a little bit. I thought, this is not really stacking up.
Ms Robertson says she is bemused that her experience kick-started a re-evaluation of the breastfeeding policy, with pages of emails between council staffers discussing the change. She says the council is concerned about the risk of contamination, but she believes it's more about attitudes.
The issue seems to be the act of breastfeeding in a pool. Seems to be fine to breastfeed outside the pool, then get straight in the pool, where baby could potentially spill. But there's something with them about the act of breastfeeding in a pool.
Wellington City Councillor Fleur Fitzsimons agrees. She says the council needs to be working to make Wellington supportive of breastfeeding parents, not making things harder for mums.
I don't think that it presents the public health and safety risk that the council considers it does, and I think that further work is needed to understand the science of whether breast milk in a swimming pool really is that major of a problem.
Fleur Fitzsimons says the city is also woefully lacking in parenting spaces, and she will be pushing for the science to be looked at before a policy review in the new year. But Jane Cartwright from the Breastfeeding Alliance says she can understand the reasons for the council's decision.
We appreciate that they may not
want to have mothers breastfeeding in the water, just as they don't like having people eating food or drinking food in the water when they're swimming.
La Leche League National Coordinator Janine Pinkham says the contamination issue wouldn't in any case apply to mothers who are actually breastfeeding in the pool.
Anyone who's breastfeeding shouldn't really be allowed to go in the pool if they're worried about contamination due to breast milk, which would be ridiculous, wouldn't it?
She says it's a disappointing decision and only puts up more barriers for mothers.
They're doing their best. If they need to breastfeed in the pool, that's what they need to do. Nobody wants to breastfeed in the pool in full view of everyone, I'm sure. But they've made the decision because that's the best thing for them and their baby and the whole family at the time.
Best or not, suckling and splashing is out for babies at council pools in Wellington, at least until January, when the new policy will be reviewed. In Wellington for Checkpoint, Charlotte Cook.
In a significant win for monkey bar acrobatics and schoolyard democracy, 7-year-old Kaylee Dryden has successfully petitioned her school for the right to ditch her pinafore uniform in favour of shorts during the summer months at least. Kaylee, who goes to Dunedin St Francis Xavier, wrote to the board outlining her frustrations with the pinafore's limitations and detailing her case for shorts. I gave Kaylee a call earlier today. Hello Kaylee, my name's Lisa. How are you today?
Good.
That's fantastic. I'm really interested in this letter that you wrote, and I'm wondering, would you mind reading it for me now?
No. Dear Miss Dolly and St Francis Xavier trustees, hi, I am Kaylee Dryden from Moon Street. I am writing to you to see if the girls can have an option to wear shorts as part of the uniform, especially in summer. The current pinafores we wear are too heavy, flappy and difficult and are not ideal in the heat. Here are some reasons why I would like the option to wear shorts. Easier to play outside and hang upside down on the monkey bars and to play games. Easier and faster to get into PE uniform. Cooler, less itchy, less likely to get caught on things, e.g. nails sticking out of the playground fence. I don't think the option of collects would be any better than the pinafore, as they are also flappy and itchy. Before writing this letter, we asked a few of the parents and children, and they thought this was a fantastic idea. Just as an idea, a white polo shirt, maybe with the school logo, would look great with a pair of navy shorts. Thank you for considering.
That is a great letter, Kaylee, and really wonderful reading. Thank you for that. Can you just explain to me the monkey bars, when you wear the pinafore, what's the problem there?
Because it's hard to hang upside down.
So the dress falls down, does it, when you're hanging upside down?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not really good, is it? So, and are these uniforms, the dress, the pinafore, what don't you like about that?
Because it's too itchy, and because it's too itchy and it's hard to get into.
Yeah, I can understand that. I don't like things scratching my skin either. So shorts, what do you reckon's great about shorts for you?
Because I can hang upside and I can be free.
Excellent. Now, I understand you've had the opportunity to wear the shorts to school. What was that like?
It's fun and good on the monkey bars.
So are you really keen on the monkey bars, Kaylee?
Yeah.
What can you do on them? What tricks can you do on the monkey bars?
I can get up on the very top and I can swing down the pole that holds it up.
What did you think about the boys getting to wear shorts when you couldn't wear shorts? What did you think of that?
I think it was unfair.
So are there any other things that you would want to change at school, Kaylee?
No, not really.
Lucky.
Is that Mrs. Jolly there?
That is.
So what do you think of the fact that Kaylee went to the trouble of writing a letter to the board?
Oh, look, we were absolutely delighted to get her letter because part of our vision is to develop students who are confident problem solvers, and Kaylee is certainly that.
Yeah, I don't know when the last time you hung upside down on the monkey bars was, Mrs. Jolly, but it's not a good look in a dress, is it?
No, it's not ideal unless you've got your tights on.
Exactly. So what was the school's view on shorts? No objections to shorts? Practical solution?
Practical solution, and she had stated her reasons so perfectly clearly that it just made sense to us. We didn't know it hadn't happened before.
And that's Mrs. Jolly, the school principal there, and go Kaylee and Grandma for helping with spelling on the letter.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui ko Susana Leata tēnei. MPs continue to make their final contributions to the end-of-life choice bill. The debate for their third reading has been extended to 3 hours, meaning twice as many speeches as usual. The members' bill in the name of ACT leader David Seymour is expected to pass comfortably tonight. It would allow terminally ill adults to request a medically assisted death, subject to a referendum being held next year. National MP and vocal opponent Chris Pink told Parliament a number of questions remained.
What is the number of vulnerable New Zealanders who may be coerced to exercise the so-called choice absent other choices? And a further question might be not whether the bill is now better than it was before, less dangerous in other words, but whether it is good enough now.
Helensville MP Chris Pink. A court has heard the man accused of murdering Grace Millane told a Tinder date he knew of someone who'd been done for manslaughter after rough sex went wrong. The evidence comes from a woman who met the accused for a drink in Ponsonby as Ms Millane's body lay in his City Life apartment. Annika Smith reports.
This afternoon, the woman, who has name suppression, said the man told her he knew of a man whose girlfriend died after they had rough sex involving strangulation that went wrong. She said the accused was calm but intense as he told her the woman died and the man got done for manslaughter. The woman also told the court the man talked about how lots of bodies were going missing in the Waitakere Ranges because police dogs couldn't smell below 4 feet underground. It's accepted that Grace Millane died in the man's apartment before he buried her body in the Waitakere Ranges. The Crown says it's murder, while his defence say her death was accidental after the man applied pressure to her neck with her consent and encouragement. The trial continues. Ātui te ko ti matua ko Annika Smith tēnei.
Winston Peters' lawyer says top public servants briefing ministers about his pension overpayment was simply salacious gossip. Mr Peters' case against the State Services Commissioner, former Ministry of Social Development boss and 2 former national ministers for breaching his privacy has wrapped up this afternoon. In his closing, Brian Henry told the court the decision to tell Anne Tolley and Paula Bennett about the overpayment was not politically neutral. He says if it didn't involve Mr Peters, the disclosure would never have been made.
Mr Peters' identity does not add to an assurance that matters in respect of prominent persons has been dealt with properly. Its only value is salacious gossip. It has no other value to the Minister.
Brian Henry. Justice Venning has reserved his judgment. A water-bombing helicopter has crashed while fighting bushfires on the Darling Downs west of Brisbane. The pilot is being treated for minor injuries. Conditions are worsening in parts of Queensland following an unfavourable wind change, with more than 70 fires burning around the state. The government is promising action on period poverty before the next budget to help women and girls who are struggling to buy sanitary products. Today, the Minister for Women, Julianne Genter, accepted a petition with 3,000 signatures calling on the government to provide period products for all students. She says cost is not the only barrier, as some girls are embarrassed to even ask for sanitary items.
It's really important that we have ways to make sure that there's less stigma associated with periods, and that girls and women do feel more comfortable talking about it because it is a normal part of life, but also that any policy design takes into account people's preferences.
Julianne Genter says there will be an announcement on the issue before the next budget. Australia's High Court has ruled that the former Vatican Treasurer George Pell should be given a final chance to challenge his convictions for child sex abuse. Cardinal Pell is serving a 6-year prison sentence for abusing 2 choir boys in Melbourne in the 1990s. He has always maintained his innocence. From Sydney, here's the BBC's Shaima Khalil.
A full bench of 7 judges will decide on George Pell's second and final appeal in Australia's High Court. He lost the first challenge to his conviction in August at Victoria's Court of Appeal. A lawyer for one of the victims' fathers said he was gutted when he found out that the case would be reopened in Australia's top court. In his first appeal, Cardinal Pell claimed that the guilty verdict had been unfair and had relied unreasonably on the testimony of one victim. He will now argue the judges were wrong in their decision on those grounds.
Shaima Khalil reporting. It's coming up to 5 minutes past 6. The Australian netball coach Lisa Alexander wants the Constellation Cup against New Zealand restored to a 5-test series to make the most of the sport's fiercest international rivalry. Alexander says the current 4-match format has an obvious flaw, as it allows the Trans-Tasman series to be decided by points differential, as was the case last month when Australia retained the title following a 2-all series stalemate. Of 7 Trans-Tasman clashes this year, 4 were decided by just a single goal. The Kiwis' 5/8 Kieran Foran is set to miss the entire National Rugby League season next year. Foran had shoulder reconstruction surgery yesterday after he was injured playing for New Zealand earlier this month in the test against Great Britain, and his Canterbury NRL club has confirmed he still needs further surgery and his recovery could take up to a year. The Blues coach Leon MacDonald doesn't expect the set-piece domination used by Rugby World Cup finalists South Africa and England to rub off on New Zealand Super Rugby teams. The Super Rugby sides have officially announced their squads for 2020, with the season kicking off earlier than ever on January 31st. The New Zealand style has long been based around an expansive game, and McDonald doesn't expect that to change.
We play the game we play, don't we? You know, New Zealanders, the Blues and all the teams here, all the New Zealand teams want to use the ball. It's what we're good at, and it's what we enjoy doing, and it's what our fans like to see. So I can't see it changing too dramatically.
Leon MacDonald. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, a window on the world of mixed martial arts champion Francis Ngannou and why he's taking his winnings back home to Cameroon. Rizwan Asghar on bringing online voting to Aotearoa. As simple as hitting the like button on Facebook? I kind of hope not. And the French director Willem Meidachevsky, who's made a documentary about a reindeer just in time for Christmas. On Nights with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland to Taranaki, including Coromandel, Bay of Plenty, Taupo and Taumaranui. Fine spells today, rain tomorrow morning, possibly heavy with thunderstorms, returning to the west from tomorrow night. Gisborne to Wairarapa, including Taihape, mainly fine, scattered showers tomorrow morning and evening. Whanganui to Wellington, also Nelson and Marlborough. Patchy drizzle tonight, rain overnight, norwesterly gales in exposed places. Occasional showers tomorrow, mainly in the evening, with thunderstorms possible then too. Bulla and Westland, periods of rain, heavy and possibly thundery, easing for a time tomorrow morning. Canterbury, Otago and Southland, rain spreading north tonight, heavy about the headwaters, norwesterly gales in exposed places, mainly fine tomorrow. Scattered afternoon and evening showers, some heavy and possibly thundery. Fiordland and Stewart Island, showers. Chatham Islands, mainly fine, showers tomorrow afternoon. RNZ National, it's coming up to 8 minutes past 6.
Thanks, Susanna. If you're just joining us, this is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. Let's head to Parliament now, where MPs continue to rise to their feet to argue for and against voluntary euthanasia during the bill's third and final debate. The End-of-Life Choice Bill, a members' bill in the name of ACT leader David Seymour, would allow terminally ill adults to request either a lethal dose from a doctor or to take it themselves. 3 hours has been allowed for the debate, which means twice as many speeches as usual. The second reading debate ended with a vote 70-50 in favour of the bill, meaning 10 MPs will have to change their mind to derail it tonight. And if it does pass, New Zealanders will have the final say at the ballot box at next year's election. David Seymour had this message for those who accused MPs of abdicating their responsibility by supporting the referendum.
That criticism ignores that Parliament has to pass the bill before the referendum is possible. And today is exactly 23 months since we first debated this bill on first reading. Nobody can ever say that Parliament hasn't done its job. In fact, the net effects of the referendum is the public will have one last chance to veto Parliament's work.
Earlier, a group of a few hundred people protested against the bill on the front lawn of Parliament. A dozen or so MPs from both Labour and National lined up in front of them. Among them was National's Chris Penk. Hours later in Parliament, he said a number of questions remained.
What is the number of vulnerable New Zealanders who may be coerced to exercise the so-called choice absent other choices? And a further question might be not whether the bill is now better than it was before, less dangerous in other words, but whether it is good enough now.
The dinner break was called just a few minutes ago. Our political reporter Joe Moyer is at Parliament and joins us now. Joe, there has been a lot of vocal opposition to this bill, so have there been any standout moments in the speeches? How have they shaped up so far?
Yeah, no, it has been a really interesting debate so far. So as you mentioned, the debate has been extended for 3 hours. Normally we'd have 12 speeches tonight, but we are going to have 28 in order to get through all of the MPs who want to make a call on this debate tonight. The Speaker's made a point of making sure that he's split it between those for and against pretty evenly. Obviously, we have a pretty good idea at this point as to which way MPs are falling, so it's pretty clear where he's sort of going when he makes those calls around the House. So the speeches we've heard since I last spoke with you, we've had Shane Retty. Now, he is a medical doctor. He's the only person in Parliament, he pointed out, that would actually be able to legally administer a lethal dose if this bill was to pass. He said that weighed really heavily on him, and for that reason he was not supporting the bill. Now, we also heard from Adrian Rurafi, who is a Labour MP. He holds one of the Māori seats. He talked about the bill and how it would disproportionately affect Māori, basically because Māori are overrepresented in bad health outcomes. They would effectively end up taking that choice to end their life more so. We also heard from National MP Andrew Falloon. He has been a really strong supporter of this bill. He talked about the fact that palliative care is obviously available in New Zealand and is excellent, but he pointed out that for some people it's just not enough and they need to have another option. We also heard from Willie Jackson. Now, he's been a real swing voter in this and it's been unsure as to which way he would go. Now, he talked about the fact that he's frustrated, basically, that people are going on about the fact that Māori are sick of hearing that the bill violates tikanga. He says tikanga is constantly evolving and changing and that argument just doesn't make sense anymore. So he's actually decided to support the bill tonight. As we heard before as well, Alfred Naro strongly against the bill. He talked about the fact that it would do harm and it would change the value of life in New Zealand.
So what are you expecting, doing a rough calculation in your head, what are we expecting in terms of the vote tonight?
Well, it's looking as if it's probably going to land about where the referendum vote did. So remember, with the second reading, there was a bit more of a majority than we expected. It was that 70-50 split. With the referendum, it came back to 63-57. Now, we're expecting it's probably going to land somewhere around there. As you've mentioned, we're in the dinner break right now for an hour and a half through till 7:30. When MPs come back, they will have another hour of debate, and then they will vote at about 8:30. Now, that's going to be a conscience vote, but of course, Greens and New Zealand First are voting as a block in favour, so it's just National and Labour where you're going to get those split votes coming in. And Seymour has been quietly confident about this getting across the line.
Yeah, and even if he does get it across the line, as mentioned, that's not the end of it, is it?
No, that's right. I mean, obviously we have this referendum in play now, which passed 3 weeks ago. So what's going to happen is that if we do pass, it's going to be a referendum at the election next year. We already have a referendum with the cannabis legalisation one. So that's going to make 2 referendums, which is going to make going to the polling booth next year particularly interesting. Now, the question for that is simply going to be, do you support the End of Life Choice Act 2017 coming into force? Now, critics of the bill say that that question is not a good question because they're worried that people will assume that the End of Life Choice Act is talking about do not resuscitate orders, which are obviously already legal in New Zealand, so there's a bit of concern about that. We've had a number of public polls about this over the years. The most recent ones have support for euthanasia at its highest at about 75%. So those in support of euthanasia are hopeful that if it does go to a referendum, that it will pass.
Thanks, Joe. That's Joe Moyer, political reporter there, joining us live from Parliament. And as Joe was saying, they're expecting to hear the results of that vote by about 8:30 this evening, so we'll keep you across that. And let's stick with the political theme. The Deputy Prime Minister's case against two top civil servants, two former ministers and a ministry has wrapped, with the judge reserving his decision. Winston Peters is suing because he doesn't believe then ministers Anne Tolley and Paula Bennett should have been briefed about his superannuation overpayment. Mr. Peters' lawyer, Brian Henry, says there was a clear breach and the only purpose for the briefing was salacious gossip. But Crown lawyer Victoria Casey QC closed today by arguing Mr. Peters' claim falls away entirely when held up against the law. Political reporter Yvette McCullough was in court and filed this report.
On behalf of the Crown's defence, Ms Casey told Justice Venning he had only one question to consider. Were State Services Commissioner Peter Hughes and former Ministry of Social Development head Brendan Boyle justified in revealing the information to ministers under the No Surprises Convention? It requires departments to inform ministers promptly of significant matters that could be controversial or subject to public debate. She said the focus should be solely on the legal threshold.
So the question is not does the court agree with these decisions to brief, or even if the court has any reservations about these decisions to brief. It's not the merits of the decision to brief. It's not whether they made a good judgment call.
Mr Peters was overpaid nearly $18,000 over 7 years because he did not fill out the section of his application form that asked whether he had a partner. He has since paid the money back. Details of the overpayment were leaked to the media ahead of the 2017 election. Mr Peters has 11 complaints, including that the briefing was a sham, simply salacious gossip, and out of order because it was an operational matter. But Ms Casey says none of these complaints are relevant to the legal question at hand, privacy.
None of them establish that there was a reasonable expectation in private facts. None of them establish that the communications from the Chief Executive to the ministers constitute highly offensive publication. So I submit that the claim, the breach of the tort of privacy, falls away entirely.
Ms Casey urged the judge to take great caution, saying that even a passing criticism from the High Court could have a chilling effect on the public sector.
These are extremely serious allegations. The implications for Mr Boyle and Mr Hughes would be catastrophic. This challenge goes right to the heart of their professional and personal integrity, and if established, would be the end of any career for them in the public sector.
In his closing, Brian Henry said because of the way things played out in the trial, he thinks the leak to the media can be traced to MSD. And he again pointed the finger at MSD staff for the overpayment happening in the first place.
And it's very simple. Had the MSD staff said, please complete the question, we just wouldn't be here.
Under cross-examination yesterday, then MSD head Mr Boyle said it was assumed that Mr Peters didn't have a partner because he ticked a box saying he was living apart or separated. Mr Henry dismissed this as a retro idea.
To try and avoid the fact that there was involvement in the mistake by the MSD.
Mr Henry said the disclosures were not politically neutral and had no value to the ministers.
The actual reason for the disclosure, the surprise, was the plaintiff's name. But for this fact that this was Winston Peters, the disclosure would never have been made.
Mr Henry said everyone involved in this case is politically astute enough to understand the social and mainstream media storm that would occur if this became public, and to foresee the damage this would cause to his client's reputation. Justice Venning has reserved his judgment and suggested he may not come to a decision before the Christmas break. In Auckland for Checkpoint, Yvette McCullough.
Police have released CCTV footage of a man who they believe is opportunistically preying on young women on Auckland's North Shore. Last Friday afternoon, a woman in her mid-20s was assaulted from behind and left with a dislocated shoulder while jogging on a track between Browns Bay and Beechwood Road. CCTV footage shows a man was in the area at the time of the attack, and if you're watching, you can see the video now. Now, the man is described as mid-20s, 5'10", and overweight, and he's walking and then running from a walking path. There were two other incidents where women were assaulted on a track between Murray's Bay and Rothsay Bay nearby in October. Our reporter Jordan Bond asked Detective Senior Sergeant Callum McNeil if there was any sexual element to last Friday's attack.
At this stage, we haven't identified any sexual element to any of these assaults. The offender appears somewhat opportunistic, and he preys on women that are by themselves.
Okay, and then so the other two in between Nearby Beach, Rothsay Bay and Murray's Bay, how confident are you that they're linked? Do you have any CCTV footage or the nature of them and the timing of them? Does that indicate that they may well be the same offender?
Look, in fact, the second incident, the female victim involved hadn't or didn't actually realise what had happened. She may have been knocked unconscious momentarily and has come to surrounded by members of the public. So initially we didn't realise that that was an assault. Now with these other two cases, we believe she was assaulted in a similar fashion to the other two women. So we have three incidents that we're looking at, one on the 10th of October, the second on the 24th of October, and then this last one on the 8th of November. Look, I want to reassure the community that we are treating each of these incidences seriously. We took steps to notify the community after each of the Murray's Bay incidents. The victim in the second incident, as I said, was initially found on the ground with injuries that she couldn't remember how they occurred. Due to the similar circumstances between this incident and the previous ones, we are treating them as an assault matter, and we are looking at the possibility that each incident involved the same offender.
That's Detective Senior Sergeant Callum McNeil, and we'll put that CCTV video up on our Facebook page and our web page. It is 20 minutes past 6. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. As fire crews battle over 300 bushfires in Australia, 13 firefighters have been treated for injuries. The latest hurt was a helicopter pilot who crashed his chopper near Toowoomba in Queensland this evening. He's being treated by the Queensland Ambulance Service, and so far 4 people have died in the fires and 50 homes were lost yesterday. Many people had to flee their homes while others decided to stay and fight the flames. Tales of survival are starting to emerge, including that of Paul Sekfi from Maxville on the north coast of the state. He shared a note that firefighters left on his fridge when he came home after he and his wife had given up hope that their home would be saved. Paul spoke to Alex Perrottet as he had his breakfast at a cafe in Nambucca and started by describing how he called his wife on Saturday to tell her to abandon the house.
Denise jumps in her car, gets the dog and the cat and a couple of possessions and races down the road the right way. There's 2 ways to go. She went the right way. The other way was already on fire. Goes 10 k's to town to a friend's place. They're there for about an hour or two, and then they get told by her husband, Gail's husband, Paul, who's in the RFS, you've got to go because it's coming this way. So it's coming then 2 ways. So they evacuated. So my wife evacuated twice, 20 k's to town. I get to town and more or less meet her and her friend at the roadblock that they're not letting me through, and they've come through the roadblock. We spent Friday night then in town looking at the wonderful app that New South Wales Fires have, which is Fires Near Me. And it looked like our house was burned. All of where we live was black on the map. So we didn't know. So we went to bed or slept on the floor for what it's worth, thinking that the next day we would have no house. So I got through. I went past 1, 2, 3. I think I went past 4 burned houses on the way to my place. As I'm approaching my house, I can see through the bush where I would be able to see a shed. It's all burned, so I can see through it. No shed.
All gone.
Hut sinks. Yeah, hut sinks. go around the blind corner, see the other shed, it's gone. And I'm thinking, well, there's no house in the middle. About another 10 metres, I can see where my house is, and there is an oasis in this blackness of my house, standing there. I think I swore quite loudly. I was pretty emotional.
So completely untouched by the fire or anything?
There's about 1.5 metres around, if that, around the house. That's not burned. And on the front lawn, or what used to be the front lawn, there is a part that's not burned. I'm just thinking, how did this happen? Like everything, my sheds are melted, everything's black. It looked pretty intense. So I'm thinking, how does this happen? And I walk up the front stairs, walk in the front door, and there on the kitchen bench is the note. It was a pleasure to save your house. Sorry that we couldn't save your sheds. Urunga RFS. P.S. We owe you some milk. I was just about in tears at that stage. Rang up my wife, said, I didn't sort of say anything. I said, what would you like me to bring? And, we had a bit of a cry. I can't live in my house. There's no water, there's no power. It smells like smoke. Everything does.
But it's there.
But it's there. And, my little bit of paradise in the forest, we can rebuild.
What do you have to say to those guys, Paul?
Well, I've spoken to two of them and had a messenger conversation with the captain. They're worth naming. Dale, who is a deputy captain who left a note. Tash, the captain, she sounds like the most amazing person. Gary, the truck driver, and Craig. They told me that they used my house as a sort of a refuge to weather the firestorm, and they could not drink any of the water in the truck because it had gone foul. It had gone hot. They couldn't drink it. So when they were in my house, which was open, my wife ran, so the house was open. When they're in the house, they found the fridge, opened the fridge, found some milk. They've since admitted to cheese and peanut butter, which is pretty cool. And so they wrote the note and leaving, not knowing whether they'd done enough to save the house. They were running out of water and they needed to retask. So they didn't know whether my house was saved. When Dale, who'd written the note, got back to me on Facebook, I just put it on Facebook because I was so excited I needed to tell somebody, I wasn't thinking anything other than this needs to be told to my family and friends that the house is okay. But he said, you have made my day, Paul. And I'm thinking, how's that? You saved my house. How am I making your day? But they found out that they'd saved the house, so all the effort was worth it. They don't often know that.
And that was Paul Sekfi there talking about those heroic firefighters who drank his milk and saved the house. And as Paul says, they've since admitted to having a bit of a nibble on the cheese and peanut butter. And he was talking to Alex Perrottet there. Lunchgoers in Christchurch were given a special treat today as world-renowned cellist Yo-Yo Ma made an appearance on the banks of the city's Avon River. The free concert aimed to highlight the value of Canterbury's rivers and waterways, part of Ma's International Bark project. The project asks people to consider their cultural connections and how it helps them imagine a better future. For over an hour, Yo-Yo Ma, who was supported by local artists, delighted hundreds of people who stopped by the riverbanks. Christchurch reporter Anand Zaki was there.
American cellist Yo-Yo Ma, the once child prodigy who performed to former US Presidents Dwight D. Eisenhower and John F. Kennedy at the age of 7, today gave a very different concert. 3 weeks ago, he challenged artists in the Garden City to create a community event to help people understand their environment and each other. That invitation was taken up by Christchurch artists Juliet Arnott and Kerapiti Paraone.
And so Kerapiti and I decided to respond to that with this idea of just coming to the river and just simply to sing across the water, to acknowledge the water, and to gather together in a place that often we probably don't take the time to do that.
Ms. Arnott says to have Yo-Yo Ma play for free is a treat for the region.
We feel so grateful that he is willing to come and stand next to this and to be a part of something that speaks to that importance of our relationship with water.
Superfan Murray Jameson is one of the lucky few who managed to get close to Yo-Yo Ma at a hangi yesterday, prior to his paid concert in Christchurch last night.
People were asking me about him yesterday. Some people didn't know, and I said, have you heard of the Beatles, Bruce Springsteen? This guy is bigger than them in the concert, in the Baroque. He does Bach, he does everything.
Getting up close with the music legend, Mr. Jameson even got a selfie together, leaving him close to being starstruck.
Almost, yes. A little bit shocked, but it was just wonderful. And because the guys who are looking after him said, come on, we must go back. And he saw me standing there a bit like, oh dear. And he just walked up and said, I'll take a selfie for you.
Despite being the star attraction, Yo-Yo Ma stayed away from media, instead talking to the audience directly.
I just want to say, I'm so moved to be so beautifully hosted by all of you and the few days that we have been able to spend here.
But it wasn't just Yo-Yo Ma who performed for the people of Christchurch, with local musicians Marlon Williams, Sister Waitoa and instrumental group Project Mare taking stage. Together with Flax Weavers and Waiata and Te Reo Māori, Canterbury's culture was proudly showcased for its people. Playing with Project Mare was flautist Tamara Smith, who says being able to perform today feels like a special gift.
Everything that I had done in my life had kind of culminated in this moment, because just community work and then being really interested in different cultures as to bring together all these different people and their different instruments together into one voice that is all interconnected with water.
An experience that the local audience and musicians themselves will never forget. In Christchurch for Checkpoint, Anand Zaki.
And Anand's piece will go up on our Facebook page and website. It was filmed by Simon Rogers. Some beautiful pictures in that. Getting an overwhelming amount of feedback from you on Euthanasia. Both sides of the fence covered there. Judith says, having witnessed some cruel deaths, she would support widening the eligibility criteria. But a nurse has got in contact to say totally opposed to the euthanasia bill. Lottie, you not impressed with EQC apologising publicly? Dean says, does that mean they're going to stop taking claimants to court and finally pay them properly? Another one, no, the apology means nothing. And just finally to Kaylee, a shout out to her. Some of you have got in touch to say good on her for winning the